Why is Africa still so poor? Africa has struggled with poverty for centuries, and the real causes are often misunderstood by most people. In this video, we will explain the abundance of Africa's historical wealth, its subsequent decline, and the enduring poverty that persists today. We will also draw comparisons with wealthier regions. In the 14th century, when Africa thrived as a vibrant continent, East Africa was very active in the Indian Ocean trade, and West Africa boasted the generational wealth of empires. They had skilled craftsmen, abundant goods for export such as gold, diamond, ivory, and salt, and they excelled in advanced metallurgy, mathematics, and diverse governance systems. Tragically, due to external and internal forces throughout history, such as colonization, corruption, and power struggles within African empires, slave trades, and governance issues, progress has been hindered and its resources have been severely exploited. These historical events have had long-lasting impacts on the continent's economic and political stability, contributing to the challenges and widespread poverty faced by many African nations today. All these real causes of Africa's decline will be explained, but first, let's talk about the historical wealth and riches of Africa in its prime. Throughout history, Africa was home to some of the world's richest and most powerful empires. These empires held incredible wealth due to the abundance of valuable resources within Africa's borders. Let's take a journey through time to explore these remarkable African empires and the valuable resources they possessed. Long before exploitation by external forces, Africa was a treasure of riches. The continent had abundant gold. Considered to be one of the most precious metals in the world, African empires had vast gold reserves, often found along the banks of mighty rivers. The continent was also famous for its diamonds, which sparkled and dazzled. These precious gemstones could be found deep within the earth, making them incredibly rare and precious. Salt may not sound glamorous, but it was an essential resource for preserving food. It was like gold to many African empires because it ensured that they had enough food even in times of scarcity. Ivory came from the tusks of elephants, and it was highly sought after for its beauty and versatility. This resource could be crafted into intricate designs and artwork, making it a symbol of luxury and wealth. Africa was also rich in fertile lands. The empires that controlled these fertile regions could grow crops like grains, vegetables, and fruits, which were essential for feeding their people. This agricultural wealth made these empires strong and prosperous. African craftsmen played a key role in increasing the wealth and demand of Africa through their remarkable skills and artistic creations. These skilled artisans, hailing from various African empires, possessed expertise in a wide array of crafts, including weaving, metalwork, ceramics, and textiles. Their craftsmanship contributed not only to the prosperity of their local communities, but also to the broader economic success of their empires, fostering a robust demand for African goods. All of these resources, including gold, diamonds, salt, ivory, fertile lands, and vibrant textiles and crafts, contributed to the immense wealth of African empires. Their wealth wasn't just measured in riches, but also in the knowledge and skills they possessed. The riches of these African empires often remained within their borders, used to improve the lives of their citizens. They built magnificent cities with grand architecture, including palaces, temples, and walls. Their powerful armies were well equipped with the finest weapons and armor. Art and culture thrived, producing beautiful sculptures and paintings that celebrated their heritage. Tragically, the wealth and riches of Africa were fated for exploitation. External forces had a key role in the decline and corruption of Africa's prosperity, mainly the Ottoman and European empires. The Ottomans sought slaves through warfare in Eastern Africa, while Europeans en route to Asia turned to West Africa for supplies. As a result, Africa's wealth increasingly began to rely on exports and trade, which was by then deeply intertwined with the Atlantic slave trade. European explorers and colonial powers came with their own ambitions, seeking to exploit the vast resources of the continent. They used their technological advancement to extract African wealth and resources and transport it across the seas to distant lands. Colonial rule disrupted the natural order of African empires. European powers established control and exploited the people and resources, diverting the wealth to their homelands. The exploitation created great inequality and suffering. The Ottoman Empire needed slaves, and they found it in East Africa. This led to a profitable trade that affected Africa. Europeans were exploring and found the Americas. They started colonies there and needed people to work for them. So, they turned to Africa for slaves. African rulers were also part of this trade. They captured people and sold them to European traders. It's like a triangle. They bought slaves in Africa, took them to the Americas for work, brought back raw materials to Europe, and then returned to Africa with goods to buy more slaves. This trade had a long-lasting impact. African industries couldn't compete with European and Asian imports, causing economic problems. To top it off, African leaders had to spend a lot on their armies because of warlike empires nearby. This left less money for economic development. Ironically, Africa's downfall was convenient for European and Ottoman powers. It allowed them to profit from the slave trade. Jump to the 20th century. Most African nations gained independence, but they faced immense challenges. They inherited poor infrastructure and faced a tough transition to a free market system. Many African nations tried something called African socialism. It meant the government controlled industries and had trade restrictions, but this system didn't work. There were inefficiencies, a lack of skilled workers, harsh conditions, and diseases. In the 20th century, the rise of socialism in many African nations brought with it promise and peril. While socialism aimed to address inequality and uplift the impoverished, it often led to disastrous consequences for the continent. One of the most significant problems was the creation of opportunities for greedy politicians and business persons to exploit resources and manipulate the system for their own gain. Under the guise of state control, centralized planning, and social equity, socialist policies allowed for vast government intervention in various sectors, including the economy. In reality, this opened the door for corruption, embezzlement, and a profound misallocation of resources. Greedy politicians and business elites took advantage of this, manipulating state-run industries and diverting funds intended for public welfare into their own pockets. This exploitation not only eroded the economic stability of these nations, but also led to further impoverishment, as essential resources and funds were essentially stolen for private gains. Thus, the noble goals of socialism often became distorted in practice, resulting in an environment ripe for exploitation by those who cared more about personal profit than the welfare of their nations. In the late 20th century, corruption, unstable democracies, and limited economic growth were major issues. Many Africans still struggled with poverty. African leaders, often dictators, used bribes from foreign companies to stay in power. This situation led to support from Western institutions, who apparently wanted stability in the region. Protests started to erupt across Africa. Rich countries decided to promote democracy instead of funding dictators. new leaders came into power, focusing on fighting corruption and poverty. They encouraged private sector growth, attracted foreign investors, and let Africans set up their businesses. The democratization process spread across Africa, bringing stability and more business opportunities. Fast forward to the 21st century, African countries have been working together more, reducing trade barriers and investing in governance and talent. Some African countries are growing rapidly, but challenges like climate change, child malnutrition, and unemployment still exist. African nations have learned from East Asian countries and are building industries, attracting international jobs, and nurturing a skilled workforce. A new generation of educated Africans is entering the job market. They are creating a fast-growing middle class, which can drive the African economy. So, Africa is on a journey to transform itself. It's essential to understand its past and present to appreciate its potential future. In conclusion, Africa's journey through history has been a complex one. From the remarkable wealth and prosperity of its empires in the 14th century, which thrived on abundant resources, advanced knowledge, and highly skilled labor, to the tragic exploitation brought about by external forces and internal conflicts. The continent's path to enduring poverty was essentially kept unchanged by human greed and immorality. The exploitation reshaped the continent's destiny, disrupted the natural order, led to profound inequality, and severely affected African industries and economies. The impact of this exploitation was felt for generations. Socialist policies led to government intervention in the free market, misallocation of resources, and a distorted implementation of noble ideals, causing further impoverishment. However, the late 20th century marked a turning point as Africans protested against oppressive regimes and embraced democracy. With new leadership came a focus on fighting corruption, promoting private sector growth, and attracting foreign investors. In the 21st century, Africa has shown resilience and adaptability. Regional collaboration reduced trade barriers, and investments in governance and talent are encouraging economic growth. Some African nations are among the world's fastest growing economies, while challenges like climate change, child malnutrition, and unemployment persist. A new generation of educated Africans is entering the job market, driving the growth of a bourgeois middle class. As Africa harnesses its potential and the talents of its people, there is a sense of hope and empowerment that the continent is on the path to realizing its long-awaited potential.